Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of VCTV. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. We're here to talk about one of our favorite subjects, and that is blockchain. But more importantly, we want to talk about decentralized finance, also known as DeFi, and some of the surrounding activities, whether that be in banking, financial services, payments, stable coins, you name it. We're going to talk about it today. We had some news just moments ago on blockchain and crypto today about some of the new activity with Opera, the very private and secure web browser that has opened up the first of 3 stable coins integrated with its platform, all focused around the Celo platform and infrastructure. We've also seen a number of other activities around stable coins and more traditional decentralized finances. We've spoken about it previously on VCTV. But before we introduce everyone who has joined us for today's panel, big thank you to the LaToken team and to Maria and Hasmik for making today's episode possible. Do check out the archive and for more on VCTV at latoken.com. With that, let's go ahead and introduce all of today's outstanding guests who have joined us from around the world. Adrian, kick us off. Little intro, little background for everybody. All right, Adrian will be back in just a moment, but as we continue on, Alpesh, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Alpesh Doshi. I work in technology and financial services. I've worked in blockchain for about 6 years. My background is technology. I love tech, I love financial services, I love fintech, and looking forward to the discussion on DeFi.
Wonderful. Thank you. Alexis, welcome back as well. A little intro, little background for everybody.
Thanks. Alexis, Sheikh, managing partner, Supercap Digital, finance background, and I have an EMEA-based corp team that have raised 1 billion euros in 50 related projects.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up, David, a little intro, a little background for everybody.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. This is David Tawil. I'm the president of ProChain Capital. My experience is in asset management, managing hedge funds. I currently manage, among others, ProChain Capital, which is a crypto-focused hedge fund, invested across the asset class spectrum, including tokens, long and short, equities of companies involved in crypto and in payments, and in venture-related investments as well through our hedge fund, ProChain Capital.
Outstanding. Adrian, welcome. A little intro, a little background for everybody.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here again this Monday. I'm Adrian Niculescu, serial entrepreneur and investor. I'm involved in a few projects. I would like to focus today on one of them, which is a project I'm working on for about 1 year and something. This Coin Cruncher is a news and education website for blockchain, crypto, DeFi, and NFTs. Happy to be here and contribute.
Outstanding. Ali, welcome as well. A little intro, a little background for everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. So Ali Madhavji here, managing partner at Blockchain Founders Fund, which invested in venture builds top-tier startups. We now have over 55 portfolio companies. We're also limited partners on Loyal VC and Draper Goren Home, serve as senior blockchain fellow at INSEAD, and on the board of a couple of public companies in the blockchain space as well.
Awesome. Wonderful. Last but not least, Gary, welcome back. A little intro, a little background.
Yeah, it's been a while, Kyle. My name's Gary Fowler. I'm a serial entrepreneur and investor. Done 17 startups, been involved in 2 unicorns. Was on the original management team of Click Software, sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion. And also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company. I'm the CEO, president, co-founder of GSD Venture Studios, premier AI and quantum venture studio that curates companies from all over the world. We've worked in 24 countries and uses the U.S., Silicon Valley as a port to the rest of the world. And I write a lot. Actually, my next article on quantum computing comes out this week in Forbes on quantum computing and the impact on healthcare.
Outstanding. Well, welcome everybody. I want to jump right into today's topic, DeFi, decentralized finance, and where investments are going. Currently, according to DeFi Pulse right now, we're sitting at about just over $51 billion in total value locked away in DeFi protocols, applications, networks, and the like, down from the all-time high, just over $87 billion earlier last May, or excuse me, this previous May. In terms of where investments are going, to kind of kick us off, protocols versus applications. Where do you see, or where are you seeing a lot of the investment dollars going towards, and maybe why as well? Protocols versus applications. Alpesh, let's kick it off with you. Where are you seeing investment dollars going? Was it in the protocols, is it in applications around DeFi, and your opinion as to why one way or the other?
I mean, my sense is that it's really mostly in applications at the moment. I think there are so many different protocols which have emerged in the last 2-3 years that have put the foundation of delivering DeFi, and now it's time to deliver real applications. So my perspective is that it's applications that are the way forward. To be honest, yes, protocols are absolutely fundamental to making this work, but without the applications that use those protocols solving a particular problem or providing a particular service, then you really don't get anywhere. So that's what I'm seeing.
Thank you, David. I want to come to you next on this. I mean, this is some area you and I have talked a lot about here on VCTV, and some of those underlying assets that may be driving that protocol investment. But where are you and your fund seeing activity in, and potentially why?
So I'll echo Alpesh in terms of where the money is going, but I think that's necessarily the case at all times. I think the protocol is more about manpower, and I think that the applications are much more about not only manpower but also capital power. It takes a lot more capital to build that out. I'm sure that the protocol development is continuing unabated. Those are people that are very different than I am in terms of skill set, and frankly also in terms of motivation. Oftentimes the application related activity, however, is much closer to where I am. The ability to go ahead and invest at an early stage in an application and then watch it explode because of the changes for good that it does into the marketplace, and also the adoption that happens therefrom, is certainly a place to go ahead and make money. So I think that we as asset managers will continue to focus on the application side as opposed to the protocol side. But I don't think that there is, I wouldn't think, I'm not in touch close enough, but I wouldn't think that there is any let up in the protocol side of development as well in terms of activity.
Ali, anything to add onto this? I know that your fund, again, you mentioned 55 plus different projects. You're an LP in a few of the funds. Some of those funds are investing, at the infrastructure level in terms of these protocols. They're also investing in the applications, including yourself. Where are you seeing the dollars start moving towards? I mean, remember, just as a reminder to everybody, last week, Andreessen Horowitz announced their $2.2 billion crypto fund number 3. Rumored to be anywhere from between 1 and up to 3 billion. It's settled right in the middle. A lot of that fund is actually fully mandated towards tokens and towards supporting these underlying protocols and where those structures and economies go. That's why I wanted to bring this up today. So Ali, where are you looking at in terms of this investment? Are you seeing more money going into the protocols, into starting to shift into applications, and maybe why?
Yeah, so you always see, like, I think it depends on the timing, right? So if you go back 2018, 2019, there was actually more focus on protocol level. I mean, you're seeing a lot of protocols still right now doing quite well. I mean, Solana, for example, has taken a lot of sort of media attention these days, Avalanche as well, and many others. And so I think there's, plenty of attention still on protocols, but right now there's definitely a lot more funds, and there's a lot more things happening at an application layer. In particular, just because you're going to have one protocol, but you're going to have hundreds of applications or thousands of applications built on it, right? So you're going to naturally get more attention for the most part, oftentimes on the application layer, especially because there's still a lot of gaps on this in terms of mainstream sort of adoption, right? So But yeah, I mean, I think the application layer is sort of where there's a lot of focus. It tends to shift every once in a while, though.
So let's dive into that for a moment. You mentioned areas of gaps. Sorry, David, go ahead.
I actually just want to say something on the Andreessen raise. Certainly, I think I wish I was Andreessen Horowitz. But, you know, in terms of their power, both in terms of influence, connections, and money, they have the ability to oftentimes be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so the fact that they are focused on that, that's probably why a lot of their LPs look to them in order to go ahead and essentially self-fulfill a lot of these investments. I think in terms of smaller investment dollars that are maybe more passive at times or investing in smaller structures, the risk reward on a risk adjusted basis, I think, is better in applications at this point than in protocol.
That's a good point. Alexis, anything to add on the impact of this fund? I mean, this is the largest fund to date in the industry, just as an add-on. This is one of the biggest anticipated funds, and also from one of the top handful investors in venture capital as a whole. And it's a big news. So, Alexis, any thoughts on the opening of this?
I agree with the other ones. If you're following the money, you can see that application and money is driving the driving force in this area. And I agree with David that when you deploy large amounts of capital, you can really drive the movement going forward. So that's my take on that.
Hey, Gary, any further thoughts on the impact of Andreessen, coming out with such a large fund following the announcement of, I think I tracked almost 30, maybe almost 40 different funds that were announced in May and early June in this industry, anywhere from a couple $1 million all the way up to a few $100 million, some protocol focused, some just generic as well. But Gary, any thoughts on what this means for the industry, Andreessen coming out and otherwise?
Well, I mean, so from my standpoint, Kyle, and I'm involved in one of my newest projects as of last week is a applications project of which I'm the CEO of. And it's about, how do we get this really widely distributed? How do we not just talk about it, but can we really add value in all kinds of different ways? So although the protocols are nice, the applications are really, we got to get it in use. We've got to have incredible use cases across the board. And I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about my exact project yet, but this is about, whenever you go down through tech, I've been around technology for over 30 years. Whenever you go down through it, somebody comes out with a great idea, and then how do I get it really widely adopted? I know when in the beginning of the e-commerce revolution, I started one of the first e-commerce consulting companies, people came out, I don't know if it's going to work. Then there were some ideas. Then we built American Airlines website, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, things started to change. So we're at the application. How do we get this more widely distributed in use cases that make sense so the population at large can really use it? And that's where I see, and add value, right? Not just a lot of BS, but really truly add value. So that's what, so applications from my standpoint by far. And of course, there's going to be protocol development. It always changes, and it's always evolving, right?
It is. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm smiling because I'm seeing hands raised left and forth. David, you're gonna go last. I'm gonna go Alpesh first because you haven't had a chance to chime in. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking that I was just reflecting on the size of the fund, right? If you look at the life cycle of investment and you look at the size of the fund, I mean, 2.3 billion implies that they're going to invest in Series B in later, right? Because it's the size of the fund. If they're going to invest that much money, they need to invest 20, 30, 50, $100 million per investment over whatever, over 7 years, right? So I think they'll probably have a mandate to invest in early stage because it says we invest in all stages from pre-seed all the way to late stage. But there aren't that many late stage deals. Okay, Coinbase is probably the only one, right? In this case,
Alpesh, exactly, 100%, right? But they're setting the stage, and by doing it, I don't forget who said it. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once they start to build a fund like that, people will start getting lathered up and excited and start to look at the space more, right? It's
yeah. But they're always early, right? Yeah, Mark Andreessen, these guys are, these are premier guys. You never doubt these guys. The kind of success they've had. They see the timing. They know they want to be early. They want to be early, late stage investors, if that makes sense, right? They want to be early in the mid to late stage. They want to
be early, right? I had a call with Coastal Ventures last week. I mean, what they're looking at is how early can they get in? How do they mine them? It's like a farm team, in baseball. They want to catch them right when they're in high school, and they want to start watching them. That's how they can really make their money.
Yeah.
And this is, again, a reminder, this is Fund 3 of the crypto arm of Andreessen. This is not considering Andreessen's previous investments in the space. This was the third crypto dedicated fund for the industry. David, you had a point, and Gary referenced your self-fulfilling prophecy quote. So I'm going to come back to you next, and then Adrian, I'll come to you.
Right. So I'm going to take the other side of that in a second, which is along the point of the size of the fund, coming from the asset management industry. $2 billion is pretty modest, right? For one of the largest players, in the space. I mean, in the private equity world, 8 billion, 10 billion, 12 billion. It's obviously it's targeted in a different way, but it also talks about how much money can be deployed right now. And the fact that it wasn't, it didn't blast through the $3 billion upper threshold. I mean, let's assume that was, the top. They might have raised that much if they got that much. I think it speaks volumes, or not volumes. I think it speaks to 2 points. First of all, the fact that certainly from an LP standpoint, from investors, there is still a lot of room to go ahead and make up. There are still a lot of investors that are not yet fully convinced about the asset class, about the future of this, about the security of this, about the regulatory framework. The list goes on and on. There's still a lot of room for growth on the demand side. And then at the same time, there is also, a question of, how big of tickets can you write, right? We're talking about an asset class that I think a lot of people believe is trillions of dollars over time. And the fact that, we're still only raising, $2 billion for what's considered, a mega fund, a peak fund at this point, again, speaks to how much more there is to go in terms of how early stage we are in the space.
Alexis or Adrian, anything else to add on to that?
I believe that they're just following their own allocation strategy in terms of early is everything, and when they have started to deploy, it's easy to deploy more when you see that you can allocate more. I think that's what we're seeing.
Adrian.
First, what I'm seeing in the market is like 95% are applications, and I would say less than 5% protocols. You can deploy an application very fast, and of course, the industry needs real life examples and use cases, but it takes much longer to develop a protocol. But there is huge potential on the protocol side. That size of the fund and the movement we are seeing in the venture capital space related to crypto shows that it's still a small market, and it's easy, or it's easier to dominate at this stage. So everybody wants a larger piece of the pie right now, while the market is not so big.
So with that being said, where are those opportunities? Where are those gaps? And Ali, I'm going to start with you on this. You've got $2+ billion to start deploying. We're going to put you all in the GP shoes here. Where are those gaps? Where are those opportunities that you want to start to see funded or filled to help bridge this world of DeFi and maybe even the underlying infrastructure to that area of adoption? And Ali, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, if you're trying to deploy 2 billion, one of the challenges is just the time and sort of due diligence of sort of going super early stage. And I think someone on this, you know, panel mentioned that, you know, they're naturally trying to be early on the mid to later stage. And I think that's pretty accurate on how I see it. And, you know, there's huge opportunities there, right? You can start to see pretty strong traction from a number of companies, and then you sort of just double down on sort of those companies. I do think that there's still a major gap on early stage. So this is generally companies that are, you know, seed or even pre-seed. And in a lot of cases, these guys are looking at sort of late seed and Series A onwards. And so, you know, naturally, if you're trying to deploy that much, it makes sense to focus on that later stage. But I think there's also tremendous opportunities, you know, even earlier in the space.
So Ali, I want to go down a level deeper. When we were talking about the investment around protocols and applications, you mentioned there were some gap areas that still needed to be filled. What are some of those gap areas or opportunities that you're seeing as an investor that you want to see really have efforts put strongly in, whether that be on-off ramp bridges? What are you looking at core that are those gap areas, not necessarily early stage or late stage, if you could?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things, right? This sort of could go in lots of different directions, but I mean, we sort of look at a blending of DeFi and NFTs as an example, right? So, for example, you have all of these NFTs being sold, and then you need financial products on it to be able to, you know, borrow money against these assets, for example. And so that will become, I think, a larger piece of like collateralized NFTs that, you know, is a huge opportunity. You know, you're going to see, I think, huge opportunities still with, you know, unbanked populations, with actual adoption of crypto in the payment space, which is, you know, still early, but, you know, starting to gain a little bit of traction. You know, I think a lot of these things are still early when you consider it from a mainstream adoption perspective. I mean, there's tremendous opportunities, I think, in this space. Like, we're looking at stuff in, you know, ag tech across sort of remittances and even back end layers across, you know, so agri fintech. So just to clarify there, you know, but there's also things in, you know, digital fashion and all sorts of other things in this space that I think get quite interesting when you really dive into it. Absolutely.
Alpesh, I see you've unmuted. Go for it.
Yeah, no, you know, the challenge for me in this space is, and I've been in it since 2014. You know, the challenge is, okay, there's been changes around infrastructure and changes around makeup of the market, with DeFi emerging, and obviously the rebadging of tokenization to NFTs. But I'd love to get Ali's perspective on the fact that there's a lot of payment stuff that's come around and gone. The challenge isn't necessarily creating the technology. The challenge is getting the adoption. And I think David may have mentioned, this adoption thing. For me, the biggest challenge in the market in general is widening the use of this technology to solving real problems and getting scaled adoption of those. And I think that for me is the biggest hurdle to getting to making this successful. And that for me, that is the basics. You know, I did a blockchain payments venture in 2015, which is way too early, and it was right at the nascent end. And within a year, I thought, this isn't going to work. It's too early, right? And we're in 2021, and it's still too early. You know, we're 6 years later, it's still too early, right? So my question isn't necessarily the point that I'm making is that it's not about the tech. It's about how can you get the wide adoption. I call DeFi the DeFi bubble. I call it DeFi bubble because it's in a bubble. All the people in it love it. They're all like really excited and enthused by it. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I think it's amazing. You know, when the bubble bursts and it breaks outside into the mainstream, that, you know, we got to find the inflection point for that. That's when I think is, for me, it's when it gets really, really exciting, when you go from, I don't know how many people it is, 1 million or whatever it is, 500,000, 500,000, whatever it is, to 250, 300 million, 2 billion, 3 million people start using this stuff. And the road to get to that is when it gets exciting. And I think that's why the fund, the A16Z fund, is like that, because frankly, they can invest 200 million into a company and say, right, go and invest and scale the user growth. And that's what they do. I mean, that's what they did in a load of their ventures. That they invested in, they know it's early, they know the adoption is going to happen, right? We'll give you as much money as you need to get that adoption, right? look at Facebook. I always give the obvious ones, but Facebook and some of the others, Slack, that's what they did, and that's what they invested in. Investing for scaled growth is what A16Z is good at. And I think that's what they're doing, and they see the inflection point. And for me, that's what's needed. The guys with deep pockets can drive that growth.
David, I saw you had your hand raised for a second there. Anything to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to make 2 points. Sure. The first is I'd like to see, in terms of the investments that the fund makes, and generally, I draw a distinction between DeFi, I think everybody does, and we're talking about DeFi and blockchain here. So decentralized finance, to me, is incredibly important fundamentally to the way this all works, shakes out, and ends up, as opposed to a lot of centralized or private blockchain initiatives that relate to finance. And it seems right now that there is a lot going on the private side. Certainly the existing financial institutions that are out there are investing on both sides of the equation. And if Andreessen and other funds, we see less DeFi, more centralized finance type of activities, blockchain usage inside of, private companies, or, creating software and licensing it out, and so on and so forth. To me, that is an important point to watch going forward. I think it'll be very deflating to the developers overall if we see much more going on in private blockchain activities as opposed to DeFi. The second thing is, and I think the world needs to make that distinction. The second thing is, with respect to providing DeFi, I think there's a world of difference coming from the asset management world. And frankly, I'm a leveraged finance guy, so I'm going to go ahead and browbeat my world. To go ahead and lever up assets is a money-making activity. Don't get me wrong. And there's good reason as an investor, as a GP, to go ahead and put stuff into that, put money into that for the benefit of your LP. Because investors undoubtedly are going to go ahead and borrow money in order to juice their returns, and not necessarily in a, in an irresponsible way, but just to lever up. But I don't think there's great fundamental progress in that. Levering up or throwing on some leverage on an asset is nothing new. However, bringing payments, bringing banking, bringing financial activity, savings, and so forth to an unbankable, huge swath of the world, I think is incredible. I think it's great. I think it's meritorious on so many levels. There's so much more growth there. There's so much more good there. And I think that's another thing that I think the sector will be much happier to see than frankly just throwing leverage, on assets that until now, either didn't exist or were not necessarily borrowable against.
Thank you, David. Gary, I want to come down to you real quick before we come here around closing thoughts. Quantum and AI. You and I have had conversations about how quantum computing is going to affect, blockchain technology as a whole, but also potentially the future of financial technologies. Again, for this conversation, DeFi, but artificial intelligence. We're seeing how AI may play a role in DeFi as going forward. Any thoughts as to what you're seeing in those two areas and how they're playing a role in DeFi's future? Oh, Gary, it looks like we had you on mute there.
Yeah, sorry about Kyle. I mean, so in terms of, so on the quantum side, as I've said before, the blockchain, I wrote an article in Forbes, that the blockchain will be obsolete based on quantum computers coming on board. And as early as 2022, some of the nefarious characters out there that are utilizing some of the quantum computers are going to have, between 2022 and 2027, could crack Bitcoin. So we've got to focus on cybersecurity. The second part, in terms of artificial intelligence, when you look at the ontology of the relationships that are out there and how to build a system, we talked about value today, how to build a system that actually adds value to folks. For instance, painting a picture a little bit, kind of like customer loyalty points at the airlines. How do you value that particular client? How can they trade things? How are you legally able to do it across multiple geographical boundaries? Those are some of the questions that need to be answered. And my new endeavor is actually a pretty grand project addressing some of those issues. So artificial intelligence, unsupervised and semi-supervised AI will come in to help us to be able to better understand those kind of relationships on one side, and also to be able to work concurrently with the blockchain so that we have, so those smart contracts are smart, intelligent. So you're going to see a lot of the convergence on that side, blockchain and AI, and then you're going to see the situation where we start to really analyze the types of relationships we're developing, what the value of those relationships are, the tokenization of those relationships, and then, of course, how can people trade it and still be compliant.
Thank you. And I want to come around next for closing thoughts. And in this, where do you see the opportunities? What has you excited about DeFi in general looking forward? And of course, where can everyone find you online? Adrian, let's start with you. I know you're working on some projects in this space more properly. So maybe talk about that and quickly and where the opportunities are that you see around DeFi, and of course, where everyone can find you.
I see two big problems and opportunities which are standing in the way for the huge DeFi adoption. The first one is the usability of the platforms, because most of the platforms are not created for the average user. So it's a huge opportunity for existing platforms or new platforms which will translate the tech to the average user. And the second one is the security of the platforms, the security of the funds. So to feel like when you are dealing with a DeFi platform, to feel like you are dealing with, I don't know what, classical bank, I would say. So the funds you are putting there to wait for you along with the rewards once you log in after, let's say, 2 weeks or 1 month. These are two areas with a lot of problems right now, but huge opportunities. And the closing thought around the deploying of funds, at the end of the day, these concepts, they need to enter into the subconscious mind of the humanity, so to be adopted. So by repetition, by persistence, and this can cost a lot of money, we will adopt these concepts the way we adopt breakfast, we adopt going to a supermarket, and this is the stake here. I can be found on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer all questions and to help in any way I can. Happy to be here and to come back again anytime in VCTV LaToken family.
Thank you, Adrian. Alexis, same question. Alexis, looks like we may have you on mute there.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm here. I'm online now, yeah. I'm involved today in the lending platform, and I think that's a very good way to deploy DeFi. So that's my major take on that. And it's an Indian-based startup, so it's a huge market, $1 trillion market. That's my main take. What I can give feedback.
Wonderful. And Alexis, where do you see areas of opportunity, and of course, where can you be found online as well?
You can reach me on LinkedIn. That's my first point of contact, and then we can take it from there if it's of any interest to me and to the other party.
And what areas of interest are you looking at for the audience who might not be aware?
It's mainly financial services, wealth tech, blockchain, digital assets.
Wonderful. Thank you. Alpesh, same question to you. Areas of opportunity you're seeing a rise in DeFi, and then where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation?
I mean, DeFi and NFTs and blockchain, I've always been interested in real estate and NFTs for years. We started a venture about 3 years ago called Reno around that. And then core infrastructure. One of the things for me still an opportunity, I think, is around custody. of digital assets. I think there's still a way to go. There are some new ventures of getting good funding, but I think we're still underserved in that market, and that would be interesting. And where am I? I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Alpesh Doshi, at Alpesh Doshi on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn, and if you do connect, please let me know where you saw me. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, David.
Yeah, so I'd just like to build on a point that I mentioned earlier in terms of opportunities, centralization versus decentralization. Looking back at the early days of the internet, and over time how the internet, which was supposed to be designed to be very much decentralized, ended up being co-opted and became, very much centralized. Our fund is focused on the tension between those two. So we have investments in DeFi-related tokens, but at the same time, we have pretty large investments in centralized finance, digitized finance companies that could very well steal the show if DeFi adoption doesn't happen quickly enough. So the likes of PayPal and Square, are very much focuses for us. They have incredible amounts of money. And frankly, a lot of times, if you could throw enough money at a problem, you might be able to win the race, even if fundamentally you're not the right thing. So that's what we're currently focused on, and that's where we see the opportunity, at least in relation to this conversation for purposes of our fund. In terms of finding me, you can find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter, the same on both, David D. Tawil. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Ali.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really enjoyed this. We very much see a world where there will be, parallels of, decentralized and centralized sort of operating, in sort of their own ways and growing in sort of their own ways. If you do want to reach me, I'm across all major social medias. Feel free to send me a note. And if you are working on an interesting idea, we do review 100% of startups that share information with us. We will get back to you. Just go to our website at blockchainff.com, share some info with us on what you're working on, and our team will get back to you as well.
Thank you, Ellie. And Gary, close us out. Closing thoughts, and where can you be found?
Yeah, sure. So, we've really evolved at GSD. We're in 24 countries now. And of course, we focus on artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and quantum computing. But most recently, we just partnered with LaunchX, the accelerator, and I have an accelerator, GSD Labs. So we really believe that these applications, not so much from our perspective, the protocols are really important. So we're looking for companies that have any kind of incredible technology that can be used to really optimize everything from payments to, as I said, ontology and the relationships to get the value out of whatever tokens or that type of thing, similar to what we did a long time ago in the e-commerce space. So you can reach me, Gary Fowler, on LinkedIn. Check out my show tomorrow. I've got Lorenzo Di Medici from Italy, from the Medici banking family. It's going to be on my show. We're going to talk about the digital transformation of banking.
Wonderful. All, thank you very much for all your thoughts and insights on the decentralized finance or DeFi industry and where things are today, where things are going, and where those opportunities are. To your audience, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, make sure you click like, share, and subscribe with today's episode. And also be sure to check out LaToken.com to hear from today's speakers and all speakers of the VCTV family. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. You can find me everywhere online and all social media platforms at Kyle Ellicott. Please do reach out to all of our speakers today, including myself. We'd all love to hear more about what you're building, whether it be in the decentralized finance space or some of the others we mentioned today as well, or otherwise. But when you do reach out, please do add context where you heard us, where you met us, and what you would like to continue the conversation about, so we can make sure it's effective on all sides. With that, everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow for more VCTV. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.